Okay, welcome back. Here is our first article: Challenges and Possibilities for Serving Gifted Learners in the Regular Classroom. So, to get us started, this lecture will pretty much outline specifics regarding the article and also additional resources that will help you in this process. The video lecturing part will appear on and off, so don't be alarmed. Okay, let us begin here. So, something to consider from the article, and this was a key point that I thought was worth noting and also just remembering. There are very real reasons that there are limited successes in getting classroom teachers to differentiate for this population of students, which are gifted students. Studies consistently report that little differentiation is occurring for gifted learners in regular classrooms. This quote made me think about what it actually means to provide differentiation. Oftentimes we do not really understand what that entails, so I figured I would take the opportunity to break that down here. So our first kind of jump in comes from readingrockets.org. The article link is at the bottom here, so if you want to go back to it and reference it at another time, you can. So really quickly, let me just go into that for a second. Teachers can differentiate at least 4 classroom elements based on student readiness, interest, or learning profile. So differentiation is the varying of content, which means that what the students need to learn or how the students will get access to the information is diverse. The process by which they are learning the content, activities in which the student engages in order to make sense of or master the content, the actual products, so the culminating projects that ask the student to rehearse, apply, and extend what he or she has learned in a unit, and the actual learning environment, the way that the classroom works and feels. So this is what is meant, or areas to consider when you think about differentiation. Remember that it's not just one thing, it includes a variety. So how do we differentiate for the gifted? Well, some of the things that the article pointed out were that, number one, subject matter knowledge is lacking. A lot of us gain our basic knowledge within our content, and then we grow this skill over a few years, right? So I started off as a English teacher in the 9th grade, and my skill level for teaching 9th grade English was not low, but it was developing, because oftentimes the content differs and the expectations for you are dependent upon the on the school that you're in. I will say that I felt like I mastered my content area the third time around. And when I say third, it was the third time I taught 7th and 8th grade, because I was challenged to create my own curriculum, and that actually meant me looking deeper into what it meant to learn certain aspects of English or language arts within the 7th and 8th grade. So improving subject matter knowledge is something that I think we all struggle with, only because of the fact that it's not easy for educators to know when they're not strong in a particular area, or when they're not meeting the needs of students. As often as I can see in my evaluations, content strength is not one of those things that is measured. So the article stresses that gifted students are more precocious in subject matter content, and this precociousness requires educators to possess an advanced understanding to accelerate students beyond the typical curriculum content. So that does require you to go beyond the basic level of the content, not just to vary the approaches that is used in, but also the level at which it's taught. The next thing, to incorporate diverse classroom management strategies to improve learning possibilities and the use of successful differentiation approaches. So I like this article because it looks at the real realities of what is happening when we're trying to differentiate for gifted students. And this point really kind of made me think about how our thoughts regarding how to differentiate for gifted students may be a bit flawed. Sometimes we think that they are naturally behaved, or that their need to excel will drive their behavior within a class. However, this can be the complete opposite, as the article states. It is very important that we consider classroom management as we develop these awesome lessons, right? If the students don't behave, it's not going to work. So, and it doesn't matter how great it is. And it seems like to be able to truly differentiate, you will need to vary approaches, and that often means allowing students to work alone, or while they're working alone, you work with other students. This was a hard thing for me to learn how to master. It did take a lot of different approaches for classroom management that I employed with skill after a while, but this is an important area to consider, especially if you're finding that you're not able to serve your gifted students population within your classroom. This might be one of the reasons why. Next, we're going to take a look at 3 and 4, which really looks into, just going to turn the video off for a second. How do we differentiate for gifted students? 3. So this is a hard one because I feel like, well, we all grow with our personal beliefs and attitudes towards learning and education. However, when it comes to teaching students of different abilities, I think that is very good for us to be aware of how we think about learning, and also what we think about serving, or what we think about in regards to the best approaches to serving them. So one of the things that really changed my trajectory as a educator was my ability to incorporate constructive learning pedagogy. So when I first started teaching, I didn't know that. I knew sort of that it was important to have some type of thought behind the structure of my classroom, but I hadn't really considered the pedagogical approaches that would be relevant. So over a summer, I reassessed my pedagogical approaches, and then I realized what my strengths and my style of teaching represented, and then I employ that into every aspect of my class. That made a huge difference. So how you think about students and the way to meet their varying needs and how to support that matters a lot when it comes to setting up your classroom. So the article, just to highlight here, it says, there are specific beliefs that educators must embrace if they are to be successful in differentiating for gifted learners. And I think that's critical, and it's also a very good point to make. So if your beliefs are in an area where gifted students can learn on their own, then you may not be successful in supporting them. Also, if your beliefs are in the fact that all students learn the same, or there is no such thing as giftedness, that students are all at different levels able to perform and achieve at high levels, then you may miss out on some of the hints, especially if you're in the primary level, that indicate gifted abilities. So I guess a great start would be to first of all identify your pedagogical beliefs if you haven't already, or revisit them, and then how does this disposition that you have apply to or challenge beliefs that research has stated regarding gifted students. 4, create appropriate adjustments to curriculum approaches. Well, this is something that we actually will be exploring throughout the entire course. However, curriculum approaches and modifications. Number 1, if you have the opportunity to modify your curriculum, bravo to you. Because I have taught in a lot of different environments, both East and West Coast, that did not allow me to do that. So it can be challenging when you're trying to meet the needs of your students. However, if you are able to add supplemental pieces, this is a great thing to consider. The reading states that many educators are out of their comfort zone when asked to modify curriculum. So one of the things they recommend is that you learn how to tailor the curriculum to the needs of the students by maybe teaming up with content experts. They also say curriculum modification essential for gifted student growth may occur in a number of ways depending on the student's needs and interests. So there are a plethora of ways that you can modify the curriculum, but it's important that you actually modify it. So, and that doesn't mean teaching a couple of steps ahead. It literally means readjusting the curriculum to suit the needs of gifted students, such as using acceleration of content, use of creative tasks, and the examination of major concepts or themes. So, for example, one of my interesting experience with students at our district in North Carolina, I've taught in North Carolina if I haven't told you that. After I graduated from, sorry about that. After I graduated from school, I immediately went down to a warmer state from coming from New York. And I learned pretty quickly that gifted education was not something discussed. They just called it inclusive learning or inclusive settings. So I had a student that, it was 6th grade, but he was at the 98th percentile. We did the MAPS achievement testing, and I was like, all right, well, it's a good thing that I was in school at the time, and I did not know at first how to differentiate for him, because I had a set curriculum and I had really extreme lows and really extreme highs in my class. So it was really tricky to try to figure out how to change the themes and also the creative tasks that their outcomes. So one of the things I did was doing differentiated literature circles. And these do take a lot of work, but I offered an option of 8 different books that were thematically related. Why? Because the student that I'm referring to that was at a 98 percentile, there were about a few of them in the class. He needed a different type of reading that would grow his strength for reading. So he got a 9th grade text that was skillful in the way in which the stylistic approaches of the author were different, meaning that the author skipped between time periods to make points and to create the characteristics of the main leads of the story and also to create the plot. So for even a average level 9th grader, this could be a challenge, but for him it was a great thing because he got to learn about stylistic approaches and how they develop themes and characters within a story. But it was a rough one, and I will say that curriculum modifications can be difficult. However, if you're willing to put forth the effort, a little more effort, not to say that you're already not doing that, but it might take for you to do it as a team, because it did take a lot of work for me to do that. I'm not going to lie. Next, working beyond general educator barriers. So the article discusses some barriers that general education educators, teachers face, sorry, tongue-tied here, that I thought were really important for us to consider how to respond to diverse populations of students. So she talks about first the twice exceptional learner, which I didn't really consider. Sometimes you see the student who's really, really misbehaving. You're like, oh my gosh, please, could you not come to class today? I'm just going to be honest. I've been there plenty of times. So I never really thought about, or maybe my school didn't think about the fact that the student could be gifted and suffering from specific learning problems requiring further modification in the curriculum. Paying attention to those cues can be super important to enabling the student to develop their giftedness, kind of like the case that I give you an option to read. And then also employment of key learning approaches such as non-standardized tests, extended deadlines for assignments, alternative modalities for execution of tasks such as the computer over handwritten work, and alternate choice in assignments can go a long way in overcoming such barriers. So for this same student in the sixth grade class, one of the options that he had, because sixth graders, teaching them how to, build a book report might be something that's a challenge, but he knew what he could do. So I created a choice board, and he was able to create his own game. And when I tell you he created his own game, he literally created his own Monopoly board game. It was brilliant, and it was like the students loved it. They played on it. But having that choice in the assignment really extended his ability and his skills, especially if he was developing a giftedness towards creation of gaming or creative processes for learning knowledge in a gaming format. I felt like he was going in that direction, but I'm not sure if he was listed or labeled in that way. But I know that English language arts was one of his skills, and taking the content into a game format was something he was really, really good at. So these two things may eliminate some of the barriers that you may face as an educator when differentiating for gifted students. Also, working beyond general educator barriers means that you may have to team together to locate resources through your community and outside sources. Being that I am an educator, secondary educator, I do understand that resources are limited even for general education classes. So it may mean that you kind of fish your way out there and see what is available. One of the things that my school did in North Carolina was we, as teams, wrote grant requests. So there was a grant for iPads, and the students, they had to write the request and say why they would use them. So that was like one of our do nows, and they did win the iPad. So it's super cool if you're looking for a resource if you're looking for a resource to complement your classroom dynamics. Maybe searching elsewhere might help you, and also doing it as a team. Don't feel like you have to do it by yourself. If you don't team teach, you can also reach out to other teachers in the district. That's one thing I loved about this district, is that teachers stand strong together. At least that's been my experience teaching here for 2 years. So I think that is pretty neat that they do operate as a community and reach out to folks. Next point, work with administrative staff or academic coaches to improve the support for gifted education at the administrative level. If your school is challenged with this type of inclusive group, you may want to have a conversation at your next staff meeting to see how you can accommodate the needs. So for example, that might mean pull-out options for inclusive classrooms. And what does that mean? That might mean having teams step in, or combining classrooms if they're small. There are a lot of different options, but I feel like if you don't explore them as a team, especially at the administrative level, you may not get to a great solution for your structure dynamics. So if you are at a school where you have at least 5 to 10% of your students are gifted, and you're not doing pullouts, or you're not really serving them in a way in which you know that their giftedness is being grown, you may want to consider reaching out to your administrative team, coach, if you have those, or consider together, forming some type of solution and then presenting it to your administrative level to see if it works. Next, bring in professional development opportunities that will improve pedagogical skills or research options that you can embark on as a team in order to improve your pedagogical skills. So one of the things that they stress is having a pedagogical disposition that aligns with gifted education, and that might require some additional training. Truthfully speaking, not all of us are as developed as we need to be for our job, and as education continues to evolve and our students continue to diversify, we'll need more. So I'm not sure I can find and search if someone's interested in professional development that develops or helps grow teachers' pedagogical beliefs and approaches. if you're interested, I can start looking. Okay, next, possibilities for the gifted. So now that we've looked at some challenges, I think that it's also important to look at possibilities. So there are different studies out there which I incorporated within the entire course. I wanted to make sure you had all of the latest and all of the past and present thoughts in different formats: journals, journal articles, conferences. This is a conference. This information came from a conference, and anything that was out there regarding gifted education, especially since now it's in inclusive settings. I felt like I needed to give you a plethora of resources, so this is one of them. So some of the possibilities for the gifted are in how we assess them. This diagnostic prescriptive assessment involves assessments including comprehensive interviews, evaluation of data to define problems, and creating support intervention strategies to resolve problems. It's kind of like the RTI model, but it's specific for gifted students, and it is a process you might want to look into. Next, there are different ways in which we can change how we do what we do. Modulating expectations. Educators may also modulate the expectations they have for gifted students. Some educators misconstrue the idea of higher expectations to mean more work instead of strength in the content that's presented. So with modulating expectations, you would obviously start to work on your beliefs as an educator. And then the flexibility and the approaches to content is another way to provide possibilities for gifted students. Okay, let's look here. Final thoughts. This was a kind of a quick one. Well, not really, it's 21 minutes, but here are some final thoughts that I had that I took from the reading and I kind of put together with all the resources. Differentiation for gifted learners in heterogeneous settings requires great skill on the part of teachers and the support of peers and principals. So if you think that this is a challenge, it is. Especially if your gifted students population is not separated in a cohort, or they're not clustered group, which we'll get into in a second, which is a way of moving them through general education classes. If they're just kind of thrown in and they had a previous diagnosis of being gifted at the elementary level, and then it's not kind of enforced as they get into like 4th grade and 5th grade or even 6th grade, then this may be a super challenge for you. So keep in mind that it is a team effort and that it will require you to really think about and maybe even redevelop your skills in certain areas. Okay, last but not least, here are the resources that were referenced throughout the PowerPoint, and also things that I referenced through the lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call. I hope that this gave you an overview of how to start meeting the needs of gifted students within an inclusive setting. And stay tuned for the next lecture. Bye!